Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the School Manager Part 16. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to create this dynamic selected day summary on any day you select in the month. It's going to show those lessons regardless of when or where they're located or how many in a single day. I'm also going to show you how to print the schedule, whether it's dynamically on day, week, or month view, and email those schedules embedded HTML inside the email. It is going to be a great training. I cannot wait. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I've got a lot to cover. This is going to be the School Manager Part 16. We're finishing up the schedule today, and I've got some really cool features I have never taught before. We're going to show you how to create these dynamic lessons in a single column. Notice it's a single column, but they're dynamically placed. Whether we have 3 or 4 or 5 or lessons at a single time, it is going to be automatically calculated, automatically based on the day, based on the specific times of the lesson. So notice they're stretched or sometimes they're not. It's all dependent upon that. So I'm going to show you how you can create this. You can use this in any type of application, especially scheduling with dynamic shape placement. We're going to teach you all of that. Of course, I'm going to show you how to print the schedule automatically, whether a day, week, or month view, and email that schedule on one click. It's going to put that inside an email in an HTML. So we've got a lot to cover. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you do get subscribed. I create these trainings each and every Tuesday. So the best way to get that to you is to not only click the subscription button below, but also the notification icon. That'll ensure that you get an email when I release these every Tuesday. I do also live chat every Tuesday, so I always want to hear from you. I always want to get your feedback, suggestions, ideas. So that's a great way to talk to me live, and we can get those ideas implemented right away. All right. Also, I do actually right now, for a limited time, I've got our mentorship program available for just $7, at least to give us a start. That's going to get you 5 weeks of content, nearly 8 hours. And of course, there's no obligation to continue in the mentorship program. What is the mentorship program? Well, that is a specific program for the Excel developers to learn how to define, design, develop, and deploy their own Excel applications for passive income. It's an incredible course with hundreds of students, and they're loving it. They're learning how to create their own applications. And so I do hope you join us. So that's a great course if you do that. If not, you can always pick up our 175 workbook pack. That's just $66 right now. That'll get you 175 of my best templates. It's just $66. All right, so let's get started because I've got so much to cover. This is the sample. This is what we want to be able to do. This is what we're going. Of course, I'm going to walk you through every single step. So basically, when we click on a day, we want to show what types of lessons are in that or any day. So notice if it's just got a few lessons here or something like that, just a few, we want them to show all the lessons here available. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way to do that is to simply show the lessons dynamically in a single column. I want that summary. I also want to print and email the schedule. So that's what we're going to be set up to do. This is the sample. We're going to be walking you every step of the way. So why don't we just close this sample, and then what we're going to do is we are going to go in where we left off last week. So notice this is our last week's schedule. This is what we're going to be. So when I click on something, nothing happens. Of course, here, this is where we want to row. So we can increase that column a little bit. Basically, what I want to do is I want to show these lessons, all the lessons scheduled dynamically in there, or at least the lessons based on any filters that we may have set up inside that. Okay, so that's the month view schedule. That's what we're going to be putting our focus on today. So basically, we have to determine exactly how many lessons are in a single day. All right, how many lessons are in a single time, right? I want to know how many lessons are scheduled for 8 o'clock or in this or 8:15 or that's going to help us, because if I know that there's 4 or 5 lessons, I'm going to need to split this column by that many. In other words, here's what I want to show, just as you saw with the sample. So if I copy this shape, and I'm just going to paste that here. Let's say we have 4 or 5 lessons. I know that I'm going to need to split it by the time. So I'm going to duplicate this, and we know that if I've got so many, I've got to display, even if they start at different times, I know we may have to split them accordingly so that we can fit them all in a single column. But it really depends on how many are given time. So the first thing we want to do is I've got to get a formula at least on every single time to know how many are scheduled for 8:15, how many are scheduled for 8. I've got to determine that because it is that if there's only one single lesson at between 10 o'clock and 11 a.m. or whatever, then I know I can stretch it all the way. But if there's 2, I'm going to need to go about halfway. So the first thing we want to do is determine how many are in a given single time. And what we can do is I can put that in a formula, and I can put that here in CQ. But the best way to do that is to determine when is the start time and when is the finish time. So we can do that with a formula. So how are we going to formulate that? Well, the best thing to do is we know the start times, but I need to know the end times. Now, if we look in here in the lesson database, right, we have our database here, and then we have those results in the month view. So if we take a look inside the results here, we have all of the results for the given month, right? That's based on the results here. That's based on here the lesson date or the lesson date here. Now notice these dates are the beginning of the month and this is the end of the month. So what that's going to do is that's going to produce all of the lessons in the given month. So that's great, and we've got that, and we've also got here all the way on the end here, we've got the time, the start time and the start date. That's going to be helpful, but I think we're going to need an additional formula. And the reason is I'd like to know the end times. I want to know when it's going to actually end. That end time is going to help us out determine exactly when we know, so we can fit that in. So why don't we do that? Let's place, we've got the class name here. Let's put this, I'm going to put this class name here. And I also want to put the date and time, just so we're clear on that, what that is exactly. And then what I want to do is I want to put the end time. So I'm going to add on to this. Now, so if we're going to calculate the end time, basically the end time is the start time plus the duration. If I look at this and I format this, we don't necessarily need to format this in here, but at least to look at it. So I'm going to put the more number formats here, and I'm just going to do a specific time. Let's say we've been working with this time. Let's do this time. This time here is okay. So if I know that the start time is 8 o'clock and I know that the duration here, let's format this here as well so we can get a good look on that. So we could do, let's say time, not 1 a.m. I don't want to do that, not that time. I don't want time, these are duration, so we don't want this one will be sufficient, this one here. So if I know that this starts at 8 a.m. and the duration is 1 o'clock, I want the end time being 9 o'clock. So how are we going to calculate that? Well, it's very simple. All I need to do is add the start time and the duration. So if I do equals start time plus the duration, we're going to get 9 o'clock. 9 a.m. That's what I want. So I want to bring that formula down. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have a formula that we can bring down when we need it. So I'm going to copy this formula here, and I'm going to paste it up here. So that formula is going to be, so when I bring that formula down, I'm also going to give it that same color that's going to denote a formula so that we can keep up with that and everything's the same and consistent. I'm going to drop this down for a little bit here. And so what I want to do is I want to calculate those end times, but I also want to have that in a named range. So basically, I want to use the start times in a named range, and I want to use the end times in a named range so that we can go do that. So the first thing what we want to do is bring down the results when we run our advanced filter. That advanced filter is going to bring those results in here, and I want those end times directly in here. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's inside the code. Save our work, what we've done. So I'm going to bring it just like we do here. We're bringing down the formula for the date and time, which is simply the date and the time together. We're bringing down the class name. So I'm just going to add to that, and I want to bring down, when we run that schedule, I want to include CS, and that is on the month view. So we're going to go into the developer in Visual Basic, and we're going to go in the schedule here in the month view. That's what we worked on last week. And then of course we're going to do the month view refresh. That's where we actually run the macro, the advanced filter. So when we bring over those formulas, here's our advanced filter. We're bringing in those results all the way to CP2, which is fine. But what I want to do now is I'm going to bring in, copy down class name and lesson date and time formulas, and we'll put a little bit, and of course end time. Okay, so now I want to do end time, so I'm going to change this to CS. It's going to include that formula, and I also want, in my sort, I want to include the DCS here inside that, and then actually let's take a look at that. It should be DA, I got to fix that. It should be CA all the way through CS. That's the correct formula. So we're going to update that inside the code there, CA through CS, okay? Not DCS. Okay, we're going to create that. So now we're still sorting. I still want to sort based on this specific time, date and time. That's what I want to do. Keep that the same, but we're just bringing the formulas over now. So now that we've got the formulas all set up and bringing those down, let's run this and make sure that we've got everything in the formulas brought down. Okay, so let's go back into the schedule. Okay, we'll also change this to CR. We need to bring down all those formulas. CQ to S equals CQ. Running that code. Let's take a look at that now. And now we'll go back into that. Okay, so let's take take a look here. So now we've got our criteria set. We've got our new formula in CS. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and run that, and we'll take a look at the results. Okay, good. So now we've got an end time, but it's in decimal format. We'll take a quick look at that. Decimal format is fine for now. However, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we run it. We don't need all this. What we'll do is we'll clear out the results here, and then we will make sure to clear the results so we don't have formulas there. So if we have our end times, we'll format that just as we did the start time so that we can see the difference there. And then I'll just go ahead and drop that down, and then we'll format it to make sure that we've got everything right. More number formats, and we'll go into this time. This is the one we're looking at right here. Click OK. All right, so we've got an end time of 9 o'clock. We can put if we want to put the AM or PM in there, that might be helpful, at least for our purposes here, so we can see that, something like this. Okay, so now we've got that. We've got an end time of 9 a.m. What I want to do is I want to create a named range based on this end times. Now, we did have one based on start times and duration here, so let's do that. Let's get that update there. Into the formulas, name manager, and what we'll do is we'll call lesson dates results. We have lesson dates results here, but what I want to do, if we tab over, we see that's based on the lesson date. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have additional ones based on the lesson start time and the lesson end date. So let's update. In fact, let's update that. Let's call this lesson results so it's a little more clear. Lesson results, and then we'll put in underscore dates, and then we'll do the same thing, underscore and then dates. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this formula here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it updates. I'm going to click OK and make update for lesson results start time and lesson results end time. So we'll do new. We'll call this lesson results, and then we'll do start time, and then we'll do end time. So I'm going to paste in those, except our start times are going to be focused on CD. So I'm going to go over here. Instead of CB, we want CD on this column. Tab out, tab in to make sure it encompasses the data. Click OK. Then what we'll do is one more new one. We're going to call this lesson results, and then we'll do end time because I want one focused on the end time. Tab it over. Now our end time, of course, is focused on which column is that? Take a look at this, and that's going to be CS. That's our new column there. So all we need to do instead of CB, we're just going to update this to CS. Tab out, tab in to make sure it encompasses the data. That's what I want. It is those that we're going to be using in our formula. Clicking on OK. Okay, so now we have lesson results dates, lesson results end times, and lesson results start times. That's what I want. Those we're going to use in our formula. Click on the close. Okay, so now that we have those, we can go back into the schedule. Now what I'd like to do is create a little bit of a helper column to the right of that. And I also want to show these columns. So when I click month view, I want to make sure that CQ and CR are closed. So I'm going to have a specific column here. Now this column is going to let us know how many lessons are in a specific time slot. So that's going to let us know, and that's going to help VBA. So what we're going to do is we'll call this lesson and then quantity, because I want to know how many lessons are in a given time period. And I also want to know I want to keep a count of those. So lesson count. So as we move through the lessons, so we do one at 8 o'clock, one at 8:15, I want to move through those. I want to keep track of how many we're on. So I know one lesson, two lessons, so it depends on the quantity. So our formula is going to go in here. Our VBA is going to keep track of what lesson we're on. So we'll increment this number up one so we can keep track of them. So the first thing inside that form, I want to create a little bit of a formula, and I want to use something called a count if. So we'll do equals, and then we'll wrap it on if there's an error, so in case there's any issues. So we'll do count ifs. There's going to be several conditions. So what's the first condition? Well, the first condition, I want the lesson results date. So the first is lesson results, that date that we created, date is going to be based on what? It's going to be based on this date here, Saturday, May 1st. Otherwise, also be 27. So it's going to be, that's the first condition. We need it based on that date. I also want to count them based on the start time. So we have lesson results start time. Now that start time is going to be what? It's going to be, has to be less than or equal to what is in CO4. So we're going to do inside the quotations less than or equal and sign, and then whatever's in CO4 right here. It's that 8 a.m. Okay, so that's it. And it also has to be greater than equal what's in CO4. We'll just put greater than in case that'll help us. So also going to be less than the end times. Now the end times here are going to have to be, the criteria is going to be greater, okay, than whatever's in CO4. So I want any lesson that's going to come, I want to count any lesson, and we'll put the and sign. and there, okay? And then we'll close that out the counter. If there's an error, we'll put double quotes. Okay, so I want to know how many lessons. In this case, there's 2 for the Saturday, May 1st. We're going to say that means there's 2 at 8 a.m. exactly on that. So, okay, that's good. So we know that there's 2, right? There's 2, 1, 2. In this case, there's 3. All right, okay, but it should show 3. Let's take a look inside our data here. 888-801. Oh, here it is. 801 1 second. Okay, so we had some anomaly in the data. Okay, so back to the schedule. Now it's showing 3. That's what I want. Great. So what we want to do now is I want to make sure CP3, this has got to be fixed here, right? So we want to F4 that because regardless when we bring that down, and I want that fixed and absolute based on that date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it all the way down now. And there we go. Okay, so they're bringing it all the way down to the last possible time. And so what that's going to show is all of the, let's center that. So it's going to show based on the time how many of the total lesson quantities. So we want to know because I'm going to have to split it up. I want to know how many lessons that I need to split it by. But I also want to know the maximum, right? So we're going to know the maximum because if there's 3 at 8 o'clock and 1 at 8:30, 1:15, we need to know that as well. So that's going to come in handy as we move forward through that. All right, so if we go ahead and select on this 9:30, and if I change that to, let's say, 8:15 a.m., we want that to make sure that that updates, and then it goes to 4. So let's give that a try to make sure we're working on that. Okay, and that's going to refresh the schedule, and we'll take a quick look here. Now it's 8:15. That's the way I want it, and we'll take a look at that formula. Now we have 4 at 8:30. That's what I want. 2 at 8 a.m., 3 at, and let's just check that data again. Let's see when going back to, I think we'll fix that there. That should be 8 a.m. Let's take a look at that. Let's format that and just take a quick look at that. I want the time there. And okay, now it's 8 o'clock a.m. No results. So basically, all we did was update the results. That wasn't smart. We need to update the original data. Because we've got a start time of a little bit less. So let's go ahead and update. Let's locate that 801 second because I want to make sure everything's accurate. We've got one at 1 second after 8 a.m. So it's a little bit of an anomaly in data. So I'm just going to format the times here, and then I want to make sure we use the seconds here so we can see that specific 801. All right, we'll just update that to 8 a.m. exactly, and then we'll just rerun that, and then we'll update that. So it's going to be updated now. I want to make sure that this is showing now. It's going to be showing 3 and 4 accordingly. We want probably about 4 lessons. So I'll refresh that, go to previous month, and the next month. All right, we'll take a quick look back now to make sure we got it all right, and we got our data. So we got a good 3 now at 8 o'clock. 4 at 8:30, right, and 1. So we know exactly how many lessons. Okay, so now we're ready to write our code to show how those lessons are going to be displayed in that. It's going to be something similar to what we've created before, but not exactly. So we can start with one of the macros that we have, and then we'll customize it accordingly. So let's do that. And so inside this macro, basically what I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter that's going to filter out, I want to know only the specific scheduled lessons on Saturday, May 1st, or on whatever day is located here. So that's an advanced filter that we're going to use inside that macro. So where are we going to put those results? So we're going to put them on the lesson database. So I'm going to run an additional advanced filter, but that advanced filter is going to be based on these results. So I'm going to take this data, run it through a filter, and I only want to know what lessons are scheduled for in whatever date's been selected. So we need to put some criteria for that, and then we'll go ahead and put a lesson. So we'll go over here. Perhaps let's take a look inside. Somewhere on CV is fine. We're going to put the day summary criteria, and I also want to know what specific link. So we're going to put the lesson date. Again, it's better just to copy it right here. Our original results are here, which is our results, and I want the filtered data based on this. So I'm going to put that in here. That's going to be our criteria. Now, where's it going to be based on from? It's going to be based on whatever is located on the schedule. So equals based on whatever's located here inside this date, CP3. That's the data I want. Unformatted is just fine. That's the way we probably want it here. So it's going to be fixed, okay? So that's what our criteria is. So we're going to base it on that. So we're going to look at all the data in here in our results, and we're going to just run only that data in which we want that's based on this date here. So what about the results? So I'm going to basically take all of these results or something around there, and I'm going to copy those, and I want the results to appear in another column. Let's just say we go over through DA to make it a little easier. So I want those results to appear here. And this is going to be, we'll call this our day summary results. Results for the day summary, a single day of summary of all of our cells. So we'll call this day summary results. So that's going to be a single day worth of lessons. And we're going to loop through that and build our lessons based on that, build our schedule based on those results here in the day summary results. So we have all, so now that we have that, we've got everything fixed here. Now we can build our macro that's going to bring those results just for the specific day into here. We can then loop through these from 3 all the way to the last row and then build out our schedule here inside that. All right, so let's go inside the module and create some additional macro to do that. So we're going to use the month view. This is where we're going to create it. We've already got a month view macro. We've already got the refresh. So what I want to do is I want to create a new macro. Let's call this sub schedule month view, because only for the month view, day summary. So that's what I want to create. And where do I want to start off? Well, basically I want to create something like the day view refresh, but it's going to be a bit similar, but a little bit. So we're going to use some things. So I'm going to copy this, the day view refresh. Then we're going to make a lot of updates on that because it's not going to be exactly like that, but we can start with that. That's a good start. So I'm going to copy that, Control C. You go back into the month view. I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, now we can make the updates that we need to. So let's scroll down here to where we just started. Too far up there. Okay, so day view. So what about our specific variables? So we've got last row. We're going to need to run an advanced filter. We're going to need that. We need last results row. We're going to loop through the results, so we need the results row. I also am going to need to know what schedule row. Certainly we need to know the schedule column. That's going to be very important. Okay, so what else? We're going to need to know the duration rows. I need to know how many rows are going to be duration. That's also important. The detail row, that we might not need that detail row because we're not going to be looping through the details as of yet, so we don't need that right there. And also, so what else do we need? We also need the last column. I need additional ones. So teacher row, we don't need last teacher. We don't need type last room. We don't need any of that. We do need additional, but these room row, we don't need those. So we can get rid of those. But what do need? I need the last column. So I need to know, because we're going to loop through the columns. Why is that important? Because I need to know how many columns when we get to the end of the last column as long. I also need to know the lesson quantity, how many lessons are in a specific column, right? Lesson quantity, I want to keep track of that as long. And I also need to know the lesson number. So the lesson quantity could be 5 or it could be 4. I don't know how many lesson quantities. And I also want to keep track of the lesson number. This should be, let's just call this not lesson quantity because that's obviously but let's call it lesson number or lesson count. I think we need to call that count. I want to keep track of it. So as I put the first lesson, I'm going to put 1. As I put the second lesson, I'm going to put 2. So I can keep track of the counting lessons. So we're going to keep track of that. Okay, so we need the lesson quantity as long and the lesson number as we move through the lessons as long. And I also want to know the selected lesson, and that might not be important. We don't need to know the selected lesson ID. I don't think we're going to need to know that. Okay, but the lesson color we will need, we're going to be able to color these, so that's important. So let's do that as long, so adding some more. The lesson color. Lesson, we're going to dimension the lesson color. We will want to color these based on color as a string. So make sure to see if we have that in there. I don't think we have that in there, so that's going to be need that. And also I want to know the lesson text. We've got it here. Let's bring it up here so we can put it all in one line here. That's going to be fine. Lesson text as a string. The last column, we've got this already, the last column. We don't need that here. We've got it already above, so that's good. The lesson shape as a shape, we're going to need that. Let's see what else other strings that we're going to need. The lesson text, we've got that, good. And that's pretty much it. The lesson shape as a shape. Icon, we're not going to do icons on this, so we can get rid of that. And I need the lesson start as a date, and I also want to know the duration as a double. I also want to know the schedule interval as double, and the lesson width and as double. I want to know the width because that's going to be the width of the lesson width as double. Okay, good. That's going to help us for now. We're going to pause this, the stop calculations. I don't want to run that. That's only for speed purposes, so we don't need that yet. Going to set B to its change. So first of all, I want to do is I want to remove all of the existing shapes, but not the existing shapes. We're going to call this something different, right? I'm going to call this lesson summary shape. So we're going to put it there, and the lesson, and then we're not going to be going over icons, so we won't be creating icons. We won't have the expand button, so we can get rid of that. And we probably don't need the lesson group. So in other words, we're just going to create that single lesson, a single shape, so we can get rid of all that. That single shape is going to be called lesson summary shape, lesson summary, because I want to differentiate between that. We won't need any of this. We don't need to clear the contents of the lesson field. We don't need to do any of this, so we can clear all that out. Okay, the first thing we want to do is just clear out. So basically, we're going to create a bunch of lessons here. They're all going to have lesson summary and then the ID. So I want to clear anything else that's here already. I want to clear out all the shapes here. So that's why we do that. We're going to, for each shape, anything that says that's based on the lesson summary shape, we're going to clear that out. Okay, so that deletes any other summary shapes or summary lessons in there. So now that we have that, we're going to focus on the lesson database. Again, the last row, I need to get the last row. We are running an advanced filter, but this time, remember, I'm not running that advanced filter based on this original data. I'm basing it on the results here. I want to base it on the results. So we're going to use CA as the last row, not A, but CA. That's going to get us our last row because it's based on the search, the results that are already there. So in this case, we're going to, the last row is also in the lesson database. It's going to be based on CA. CA is going to tell us if it's less than, let's say not 3. I think if it's less than 3, then exit the sub. So we're going to update that. If it's less than 3, we'll reset the calculations because we might eventually activate this, and then exit the sub out. Okay, so next up, what we want to do is we want to add in our advanced filter. So we don't need any of this, right? We're not going to be copying over formulas here, so we don't need that. And also, we don't need that as a cup. So we're ready for our advanced filter, but where's our advanced filter located? Well, it's located here. CA is our original data all the way to, we can do CS, and then the last row, which is CA all the way through CS. So let's update that to CA all the way through CS. That's our advanced filter. Now, what about our criteria? Our criteria is going to be located inside our here. We only have one single criteria that we created, and our criteria is going to be located right here. It's going to be CV2 through CV3. That's our criteria. So we can update that CV2 through CV3. So once we have our criteria, we're ready to put our results. Now our results are going to go where we created all the way from DA2 all the way to DS2, DA through DS. Okay, that's going to be sufficient. Okay, so let's put that inside our code, DA through DS. Okay, so our results are going to come all the way through there into DS. So once we have it, we need to determine the last row. What's the last row? It's going to be based on our results, which is going to be in DA. We'll use the lesson ID to determine our last row of the results. So DA, and of course, if the last results row are less than 3, then we have no data. We can exit the sub out. So we can use this here. Last results row here is less than 3. Then the reset and exit the sub. Okay, we don't need view by. That's not going to help us. We don't need any of this. We don't need the last teacher row. We don't need room. We don't need any of this. So I'm just going to view by class type. We don't need, that's not important. Type row, we don't need any of that. So we can get rid of all of that. And let's take a look at this. So we don't need any of that. We will need to go through the results. We're going to need to loop through the results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all that. We can start with the results row. And then we can delete all of that. Remember, this is only for day view, so we can get rid of that. That just kind of builds our day view schedule. Nothing we need. So I'm going to delete all of that. So, all right. So what's the next step? Well, I want to make 100% sure once we have our results and we know we've got data, I want to make sure that they're sorted. They should already be sorted because we've sorted. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the sort that we used in the macro above here, and I'm going to resort it just to make absolutely sure. So let's look at this right here. I'm just going to copy this here. And then I'm going to bring it down inside our macro. And I'm going to sort, we're going to sort the data there. Right here, before we run our loop, I'm going to sort the data. So, of course, we have different. And what do I want to sort it based on? I want to sort it based on the lesson date and time. Here, DR, this one right here, date and time. I want to sort it on both of that. So it's going to be based on DR3. So let's update that. That sort here. We're going to do, instead of CR, it's going to be based on DR. And what about our original data? Our original data is going to be DA all the way through DS. DA through DS, our last one's coming. So we're going to sort that. That's all we have to do. And I want it ascending, right? I want the earliest time. That way it's going to help us. So so it's going to be based on the date and time. So 8 o'clock, 8:15, 9 o'clock, and so on and so forth. That's how it's going to work. I want it sorted based on the data. So the earliest date and time, all in the same date, but the earliest time is going to be located right here inside DR3. So once it's sorted that way, it's going to help us build that schedule out. All right, now that we have everything sorted out, what I want to do is, remember I said we're going to keep track as we go through each lesson. I'm going to keep track of the count. I'm going to put the count here. But what I want to do is I want to clear the count out. Every time we go through this is the formula, we don't have to clear that. So from CR4 all the way through CR, let's say 103, all the way down, I just want to clear that out as we loop through that. Okay, so let's clear that out inside that, because that's going to keep a running count only when that. So that's based on the schedule. So schedule dot range CR4 through CR103 dot clear contents. That's going to clear, we'll just put clear running lesson quantity. So we're going to keep that number there. So we want to know, we're going to clear that because I'll show you how that's going to work soon. Okay, so now we're ready to loop through. We're going to create the result row all the way to the last results row. Maybe we've defined result and last result as long rows. Those are very important. So let's make sure we have those. Result row here, last result row here. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to run our loop. The first thing I want to do is determine the lesson ID. Now, the lesson ID is located in DA, right? Our lesson ID right here, DA. So we need to update that column to DA, not CA. That's DA, and that's called the lesson ID. Okay, so we don't need this. I don't think I need to put it in B10. B10 is used for calculation, right? When we're bringing in all of it, I don't need that because we're going to just set a fixed number. The reason we did that before is because it calculates all the data. Once we put it in there, we don't need that right now. So that's going to make things a lot faster. Okay, so once we have that, now what I want to do, this was to build up our lesson text. Now, lesson text is important, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that lesson text to something very fixed, right? Just based on the information that we have. So it's going to be just I just want the time and perhaps the lesson ID. That's going to make things a lot quicker. So we don't need to loop through these, but we do need the lesson text. So I'm going to put that here. And we're going to get rid of this here. Okay. Also, we don't need, let's build out the lesson text. That's the text that's going to appear inside the shape. It's going to be the time and probably the lesson name or the class name. Okay, so we're going to add that in, but basically what we want to do is we want to determine what is the column and what is the row. So now it's easy. The column is going to be easy. That's the easy part. That's fixed. Why is that? Because it's equal to column. Let's take a look at that. That's going to be column 94. So let's set the schedule column to 94 right away because that's going to be easy, and so we got that. So we will work on the lesson text in a moment, but I want a few other variables to put in first. So the first thing is schedule column is equal to 94, and then what we'll do is we'll increment on that. We'll add to as the left position based on 94 plus something else if it's going to be moved over to the right. Okay, so once I have that, what I want to do is I also want to know the lesson start. What is the start of that lesson? It's going to be equal to what? It's going to be equal to, let's take a look. It's going to be inside. I'm going to copy this here because it's based on the lesson database. But let's take a look at what column it is. The lesson start is going to be located right here in DD. That's our start time. So I want to put that inside the variable. DD is where it's going to come from. Lesson start time. After that, what else do we need? Well, we've got the column, but we need to know the row. So what is that schedule row? Where are we going to find that? Well, it's going to be based on our lesson start and the start time, right? So we need to know that the lesson start, we did that already. Now we did it down here a little bit, so we can probably copy that formula here. Let's take a look at this. So the schedule row is based on this. So we have it here. So in fact, let's get rid of this. We don't need any of that. We don't need any of that. So that's going to help. All right, so now it's going to be a little bit easier. We already have the schedule row defined here. We've already got the lesson. We can get rid of this and we'll add in the lesson text. Actually, let's put that lesson text in here. I'm going to be defining that soon. Okay, since we've already written up. Okay, so the schedule row is basically going to be the lesson start, right? We know that the start time's a variable, so we need that. So we know that. So the schedule row by the interval. So how do we know that? What is the lesson start? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Start time's a variable that we've already set. It's a named range. If we look in our admin, we know that our start time here in our schedule settings, our start time here is located right here. That's our start time. So if we know that, then we're going to add the intervals. Our intervals located down right here. Our scheduled interval is located right here, right here. This is our scheduled interval. It's based on the formula. It's based on this 15 minutes. So if I know the interval and I know the start time, all we need to do is determine, if we go back into the schedule, I want to know what row. Our first row is on 4. So if it's 8 o'clock, we look at the start time, it's going to simply add in those. So we just use a formula to determine the start time based on our start time, based on our interval. So we can update this now. Before we started on 3, but now we're starting on 4. 8 o'clock is on 4. So row 4. So the schedule row is the lesson start time minus the start time, right? So if it's 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock, it's going to be 0 divided by the interval, and then that's going to schedule plus 4 is going to be 4. So if this is 0, if the lesson start time is 8:15 and our start time is 8 o'clock, so that's going to be, we divide that by the interval, so it's going to be 15 minutes divided by 15 minutes, going to be 1, right? So that's going to give us a 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. So that means if it's 8:15, right, it's going to start on row 5. So that's how we determine that. So we know that automatically as long as we add 4. Okay, so I hope that, I know it's a little bit confusing. I'll go over it one more time because I know it's a little bit. Our lesson start time, let's say it's 8:15. And our start time is fixed. It's 8 o'clock based on the schedule. So when I subtract 8:15, I get 15 minutes. Our 15 minutes is divided by our interval. Our interval is also 15 minutes. If it's a 30 minutes and divide it, we're going to get 2, and then 2 plus 4 is 6. So that's going to help us determine row. Now that we have the row, we also want to update the duration. The duration is not going to change. It's basic, but it's not based on CE, right? We want to update that duration. It's going to be based on DE this time. So we added it. DE, the value, that is the duration of the lesson. We also want to know the duration rows. The duration rows is going to be based on the duration divided by the interval 0. So that's not going to change. We need to know there. We're not going to use the lesson icon, so we can get rid of that. And the lesson color we will use, but the lesson color is located in DP, right? Let's double check that so we know the lesson database. All the way over here, our lesson color is going to be located directly here, DP. Okay, good. So we have that. Next up, what do we need? We can go back to lesson. We may be using this again. Next up, now that we have the lesson color, we also want to know the lesson text, right? And I also want to know the lesson number. So we got a few different things to define. Okay, so what do I want to show in this shape? All I want to show is the start time and the class name. So the lesson text, that's what the text is going to be equal to. We have the start time right here. We know the start time, but this start time right here, lesson start, is not formatted. So we need to format that. So how are we going to do that? It's going to be format. And then what I want to do is I want to put the lesson start. And what is the format that I want to give it? Well, it's going to be the same as what we have before. So inside the quotation marks, we can do something like HH colon MM, and then we can do AM backslash PM. Okay, so that's going to be our lesson text, but I want to show more than that. I want to show the time and I want to show the name. So, and a space, a lot of space, and what else do I want to show? I want to show the class name. Where's that class name? It's located in DQ. So I want to put DQ in whatever row we're looping through inside that. So all I need to do is just simply copy this here and then put in DQ inside it. And whatever's in DQ, that is going to be the lesson time, and the class name or lesson name, class name. It's really a class name. Okay, so that's going to be our text. That's going to be inside the shape. We're going to be adding that here. It's going to be basically right in here. We won't need on action on that, so I'll get rid of that in a moment. But let's continue on so we don't skip around. Okay, so we've got the lesson text. So what else do we need? I also need to know how many lessons are in there. I want to know the maximum, right? If I've got an 8 o'clock, it's going to go all the way to 9 o'clock. Let's say it's a 1-hour class. What I need to know is how many classes should I appear? So for example, if I'm going to put in here, if I'm going to put this here, and then let's go put double, what is the width of that? How many classes are going to be scheduled in that time? What I need to know is, notice that if it's a 1-hour class, I see that at 8:30 there's 4 classes, right? If there's 4 classes at 8:30, I know that I've got to split this lesson up. If it's this big, I need to split it up into 4 different parts. So what I want to know is I want to know the maximum. If it's a 1-hour class, I want to know the maximum number of classes during that 1 hour. In this case, it's 4. So we can use the max formula to determine what is the maximum number of classes during that time period. Based on this, that's what we want to know the lesson quantity. So let's put that into a variable inside VBA. So what's that going to be? It's going to be called the lesson quantity. So the lesson quantity is going to be equal to, and we're going to use the application worksheet function max. That's going to give us the same one in the formula. So what are we maxing out? In this case, what I want to know is going to be based on CQ, right? I want to know the lesson CQ, our start one, which is the schedule row, all the way to the last one. What is the max number? In this case, it's 4. So I want to know the first lesson all the way to the last lesson based on the duration rows. So in other words, our lesson starts at 8. If it ends at 9, we know that it's going to take up 4 different rows. So we need to add that in to determine CQ 4 through CQ 7. What is the maximum? What is the largest number in that? That's going to be how many? In this case, it's 4. So we can write that up inside a formula. So the max formula, as we continue it, is going to be the schedule dot range, in this case, CQ, and the schedule row, and what else? We're going to use colon, and also the CQ, and CQ, and, okay, well, now we need to determine the last row. What is that going to be? It is going to be, again, we need to determine what is the last row. So it's going to be schedule row plus the duration rows minus 1. Okay, so that's it. So again, lesson quantity, we're going to max it. The starting row of that CQ, plus the last row of that lesson, I want to know the maximum. I want to put that into a variable called the lesson quantity. That's important. So that's going to let us know what's the limit of that. So once we have that, I want to keep track of the lesson number. So how are we going to do that? Okay, so next up, what I want to do is I want to keep track of the lesson number. I need to know what we're on. If it's this lesson here, or this lesson, right? I want to know which one we're on. I want to keep track of that count, and I want to put that count right inside CR. So if we're on the first one, or the second one, or the third one, I want to keep track of which column, basically which column inside a column. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If I know we're going to put 4 lessons here, this is 1. This would be 2, this would be 3 here, and this one, maybe it's going to be over here, it would be 4. So I need to keep track of each one individually. So I want to keep track of it. So as we go down, we keep track. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put a number inside this range, and then I'm going to start adding and adding so I can keep track of exactly what lesson we're on. Sometimes, and then when we go to a new area that there's no, we'll go back to 1 and start again. If there's only 1 lesson that's going to cover the time, then it would stay at 1. So it's dependent on how many lessons are in a specific time frame. So we need to keep track of that lesson count. So we can do that with a little bit of a formula inside VBA. So it's going to go something like this. The schedule dot range CR, and of course we're going to start out at the schedule row, and of course here the colon CR. It's going to be based on, and of course the schedule row, schedule row, plus what? Plus the duration row, just as we did before, plus the duration rows, in this case minus 1. So basically for every time I want to just increment that. And what's that going to be equal? It's going to be dot value for all those cells is going to be equal to whatever is in the lesson, whatever's inside this particular cell right here. So I'm going to copy that, equals, and you'll see it in action. We'll go through it one step by step, so you'll see it. It's a little bit confusing now to hard, but you'll see it so that value is going to be equal to this plus 1. So I just want to increment basically the number here is going to grow 1, 2, 3, 4 as we move through these lessons 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're just going to increment. That helps us keep track of which we're on. When I know which one we're on, if it's on 2, I know it's going to be in the second position. If it's 3 and the 4, so on and so forth, depending upon how many. So it's just going to help us keep track. So we know the left position of each one. We need to keep that running count. Okay, so that's going to help us out. It's just going to basically increment each one, 1 plus 1. So as we add that, I also want to know the lesson number, right? So now we have to define the lesson. What lesson number we're on? The lesson number is going to be equal to whatever's in schedule CR in the schedule row dot value, right? So we want to know. So that's it basically. So whatever, if this is 2, I just want to put this into a variable. Whatever number's in here, put it into a variable, because our left position of this is based on this, just as we went over. All right, so we went over that. So now we've tracking the lesson number. We have that. And also what I want to do is I want to know what is the maximum number of what's in CQ. And so the idea is once we get to the maximum, once I get to 4, I need to reset it, right? There's a maximum of 4. We can't keep going up and up and up. So once we get to the max, I want to clear everything out below it to 0. So it just keeps it track. So once we get to the maximum number of lessons in a single column, we have to reset it to 0. So how are we going to do that? We can use an if statement for that. So if the lesson number equals application worksheet function, we're going to use max on this, the maximum of the schedule dot range CQ and the schedule row, and of course CQ. I also want to know the last row, and I want to determine the last row. What is the last row based on CR? Because I want to know I want to understand the last one, the CR was affected. So the maximum of whatever's inside CR. So schedule dot range CR, and then we can just do 9999 dot end XL up dot row. Then, so if the lesson number is equal to the lesson, then what do I want to do? Then I want to simply make the change. I want to reset everything to 0. Once we've reached the max, I want to reset it to 0. So how are we going to do that? The schedule, then dot range, CR, and the schedule row, and the schedule row, and CR again. And of course, whatever that last line was here, we can just copy that because we're going to use that again. So whatever that last row, the last row value that we can find inside CR, we're going to set all of that to 0. So dot value equals 0. So basically, we're resetting everything inside the CR to 0 as we move to another column. So that's it. That's all we need to do to set it up. Next up, we're going to focus on the lesson width. So what is that lesson width? The lesson width is equal to the schedule dot cells, right? We're going to use cells, schedule row, comma, the schedule column, because I want to know what the entire width of that schedule column is. Schedule column dot width. So what is the entire width of that column divided by the lesson quantity? That's why we need, if the lesson quantity is 5, we need to divide the entire width of this column by 5. That's going to get us our lesson width inside a double variable. If the lesson quantity, making sure, is equal to 0, then set it to 1. Equal to 0, then lesson quantity is equal to 1, just in case. Okay, now also we set the lesson color. Now we have the lesson color already defined here. Make sure we have that up here. Lesson color is going to be in DP. Good, we've got that already set up. And also we want to make sure that we set the schedule, the sample shape. So now we're ready to update this. So we've got everything done. We've got the lesson number, the quantity, the text, the color, the duration, the width of that. That's very important. And we've said now we're ready to take the sample lesson shape that we have. We've created it. Remember, if we recollect back, we have this sample shape right here. All I need to do is duplicate this shape and then give it another name and then do that. Now this name is going to be based on the lesson summary shapes, which are a little bit unique. So let's do that. Let's update that. The lesson shape, in this case, it is going to be the lesson shape. We're duplicating that, but this time we're going to call it the lesson summary shape. And then the lesson ID, which is already defined. Okay, so now all we need to do is update the left position. That's going to be based on our schedule, the row, schedule column, a little bit different here, the left position of that, plus I also need to know the lesson width multiplied times the lesson number minus 1. So that's going to get us our width automatically. So it's going to set. So it's going to start at the left position, but we have to know where's that left position, right? It's not going to be, there's not going to be always on this same left position. Sometimes it's going to be here, sometimes it's going to be here. So we got to set that lesson position based on how many lessons. If it's the 4th lesson over, it's going to be all the way over here on the right. So it's got that left position is going to be based here. So it's based on this lesson number and based on that. All right, based on the lesson width. Okay, so now what do we do is we also want the top position to be based on the schedule row and schedule column plus 1. That's fine, right, the way it is. The width of that, a little bit different, is going to be the lesson width. So let's clear that out. I'm just going to call that the lesson width because we already have that defined inside a variable. The height is simply going to be the range to the scheduled row, the scheduled column, plus the duration minus 1 plus the scheduled column. That's it. That's fine the way that is here. Text frame is fine, the lesson text frame. On action, there's not going to be a macro that's going to be assigned to this, so we can get rid of that. The lesson color is 0, we can fill the lesson color. Okay, good, I like that. We're not going to have an expander button. We don't need that, so we can clear that out. We're not going to have an icon, so we can clear all of that out. We can clear the skip icon here. We can clear out the lesson text, that's good, so we get ready for the next lesson. B10, we don't need that, and we don't need this here. All right, okay, let's take a look here, and then we can reset the calculations. All right, we're going to save our work here, and then what we can do is we can check it out and see how we're doing. All right, well, actually, if we've selected a lesson, we'll undo that. If we've selected a lesson, we're going to work with B10. I'm going to set B10.value is going to be equal to the lesson ID. We've already done that. Equals the selected lesson ID. I'd like to know what that selected lesson ID is. When we select a lesson, I still want to know which one we've selected. So we can define that. So we just have to update that. It's going to be nice to know, so we reset. We still know which one's selected, just as we did previously, which could help us if we're making an edit inside that lesson. If we want to edit it, I want to have those details in here. Inside here. So let's make sure we update that as well inside. So the selected lesson ID. Now the selected lesson ID we will define up here. So we can do that all the way up here so we know exactly which one was selected. All right, so let's update those. So we got the lesson ID, the teacher we don't need, the lesson icon, lesson color, we do need that. So class type, let's clear out some of these. View by, we don't need those, okay? And also what I want to do is I want to know the selected lesson ID as a string. Okay, and the lesson color, the lesson icon we don't need. We don't need the teacher, and we do need the lesson ID. Okay, so we've got that. So the lesson selected ID, let's set that. As soon as we go into that, I want to know what is that. So the selected lesson ID equals whatever's in B10, schedule.range B10. So we know which one the user has selected initially, and we can reset it. So initial lesson ID. Why does that mean? Well, that means when they select something, when they select a specific lesson, that lesson ID is going to go into B10 right here. I want to capture that into a variable right here. I want to capture that so that we can reset it once we go through all this to make sure that it stays there and we know exactly what's been selected, so we can select it again. As we build this, I want to reselect that and know what we've selected. So how are we going to do that? Well, we do that through here. We capture here the lesson ID inside here, whatever's been selected, and then we just select it here. So once we've got it selected right here, we can reset it based on that. So going back down, B10 equals the selected ID, and then what we do is at the end of the macro, all we need to do is just the schedule here. We can do on air in case it doesn't exist, and on air resume next, and then here schedule dot shapes, and it's called the lesson group, and the selected lesson ID dot select. So that's going to select that shape again, and then on air go to 0. Okay, so that's good. I like that here. We can get rid of that. Now let's take a, so that's going to select it automatically based on that. Okay, I think we've got a few variables missing. Let's save our work, run this macro just to check to see if we have anything in here, and then fix any issues that we have. Okay, duplicate decoration, lesson color, lesson text as string. Okay, let's put in lesson color up here, and then we can get rid of this. We don't need that here, and then we can add that in, put it all on the same line. All right, continuing on, let's take a look here, update those variables. Again, we have lesson color. Okay, we didn't see that. All right, no worries on that. We have it already. Duplicate, we can't have duplicate decorations. And the lesson text, I thought we defined that. We did a lot of different variable work. So let's update the lesson text. Okay, lesson text as string. All right, so we can continue on. Let's take a look here. And then in the schedule row, we'll update that. That should be schedule row here. Continuing on, and let's see, debug. Okay, so we've got to extract. So let's take a look at this and see what's different in this CA to CV and DA to DV. So let's take a look at some of the differentiate. When you see this, that just means there's a label that's not correct in here, or you've got the range a little bit wrong. So lesson database, our original data is coming from CA all the way through CS, CA through CS. 2, we want to make sure we got the row right here. CS, so CS2, it should be 2, not 3. And take a look at that. All right, continuing on. Okay, method of range of object application where you find max scheduling, CQ in the schedule row and CQ in the schedule row. Duration rows, -1, we can't have that there, so that can't be -28. So the schedule row here, it's going to be the lesson start. Okay, so lesson start, we see the lesson start is 12 a.m. Lesson start can't be that. So we need to update that. We need to make sure that we define that as a variable before that. So let's do that. Lesson start DD. Why is that DD? The result row here as we loop through it. Let's take a look at what's in DD in lesson database here to see if we got that right. So going inside here, DD here, update that. Okay, that looks good. DD, correct. So the lesson start should be DD, making sure we have that. And then continuing on. So let's go through this lesson start. DD, the result row. The result row said DD 12. So lesson start is not 12 a.m. It can't be. So what is incorrect? So let's take a look at DD and then the result row here 12. So going back inside the macro here, DD12. Okay, so we have the wrong last row, obviously 12. So we've got to go making sure that our last row is based on DA, right? Obviously we can't do a blank row, so DA is where our last. We need to update that last row, the last row. Remember, we're last results row. We need to determine that here. So last results row, DA, not CA, DA, okay? Reset that. All right, let's run the macro again, take a look at the schedule. All right, oh, that looks really good. Okay, why don't we walk by this step by step so we can see exactly how this is working. And we select, now what I want to do is when I select a specific, I want to make sure this runs. When I select a specific lesson, so how are we going to get this macro to run when we select a specific lesson in a day? Well, that's relatively simple. All we need to do is just simply make a quick update to the selection change. So the macro that I want to run is going to be called this, schedule day view summary. And I want to run it when we select a lesson. So when we select a lesson, that macro is located in schedule miscellaneous. So going down here inside this, our expand lesson, we want the one that we're going to select the lesson, lesson select. So here, if it's same, so here we can do the lesson. Once we've determined the lesson ID, we can do this right here. All right, we'll just scroll down to the bottom, probably right about down here. We can do it all the way down here, so we don't need to write it up here. Okay, so I'm going to be based it on if this schedule is in a month view. So down here into, let's take a look. All right, right after this statement, if, let's see, dot range B3, right, that's what we know our lesson is going to be day view or week, equals month view. Then I want to do something. Then I want to run this macro if it's based only on the month views. But the first thing what I want to do is I want to update B27. I want to know the B27 because I want to display that. So B27, if we take a look down here, B27 is our selected day. B27 is the same day that is linked to this cell right here. So when I update B27, now what do I want to update it with? I want to update it with the current date of that, whatever's in L2. Basically, whatever the lesson we selected in L2, I want to put that directly inside B27. Then we can run our macro. So first of all we need to do is just update that here. So then first thing I want to do is say dot range B27 is going to be equal to whatever's in L2 equals whatever's in L2. L2. Okay, so that is going to be our set selected date. Set selected date. Once we have that, we can then run the macro. Run macro. So now when we select any specific schedule, appointment, or scheduled lesson here, it's going to automatically update. So if I select this one, it's going to automatically update this day. If I select any appointment in here, it's going to automatically update this day or something like that. So good. That's how we can do it. That's really, really cool. All right, good. I think we're done with this. So I want to walk through this macro a little bit step by step so you can see exactly how it's working here, because it's kind of hard to follow unless we're really looking at the data and seeing how it operates. So what we're going to use, we're going to use F8 and we're going to step through the data. All right, but first let's get rid of it. So it's asking us to move a lesson. Now we don't have this. Notice that this is coming up. So why is it coming up? But think we're moving on to a lesson, but I don't want to drag and drop lessons. So that's when we do that. So let's fix that right away. So that's based on selection change. So here, what we're going to do, this macro here, check for lesson changes. So what I want to do is I just want to escape out of that if it's month view. If .range B3, right? Because we're only checking for drag and drop changes, at least for now, on day view and week view, but not on month view. So B3 equals, in this case, month, then we're going to exit the sub. Month, then exit sub. So that's going to, so that we don't have that issue anymore. So when we select on something, it's going to automatically exit out, and that's just what I want. Okay, great. So let's step through this code. I'm going to go back into the macro that we just created under the schedule month view. And this one, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pause it right here, and then we're going to walk through the code. So we can do it after the advanced filter. That's kind of pretty simple. So we can pause it after we run the advanced filter as we loop through them. Here's the beginning of our loop. So we can do it right here. So I'm going to run this code. It'll stop it code and it'll show up exactly where we want. Okay, let's shrink this down and see exactly how this works. Okay. All right, so let's move this over a little bit so we can see everything, and then we'll bring the code out. We can see it in a double window. We do want to see the day so we can get an idea. So as we tab through this, let's take a look. I will use F8. So let's run this macro. So the first lesson comes up. Oh, let me reset that. Let me reset it inside there. So we'll do it right here, not here. Okay, so let's rerun that macro, and then we'll go. Now I can run it again, and so you see the first lesson. Okay, so we have a maximum. We've got a maximum of 4, right? So we're going to go all the way to 4. So we're counting. The first one we go through is 1. So next up, what do we do there? I'm going to run it again. Now the next one's 2. Notice it puts the 2, so it's keeping track of those. Again, the next one, it's 3, keeping track of those. And the next one's 4. Now we've reached the maximum. Once we've reached the maximum, it sets everything back to 0. Remember I said we're going to set everything, not the current one, back to 0. So now it's back. So we cleared out everything else. So now we're ready to run because we've already set our last one. So now we can continue on with the next one. Again, 1, now we've got possibly 2 or 3, right? If we take a look at this one here, take a look, what is the maximum? The maximum is 3, right? So that means we need to divide it into thirds, 1, 2, 3. We're going to keep track of it. 1, then we're going to go to 2, and then we're going to go to 3. So it keeps track of it as we move through. Okay, we run it again. Now we're going to 2, but notice the 2 went all the way down here because our last lesson is here. So let's run it one more time. Again, here it's going, now we've reached the last one, so everything got cleared out, and now we're ready to run again. So then again, going all the way down, again, 1, we have 1 here, and then 1 more going back down to here, and then that's it. So that's all we have. And then we have 1 single lesson, only this lesson this time, so it's going to stretch all the way along because notice the maximum is 1, so we know that we can stretch it all the way along. If the maximum for this lesson, notice that from 11:45, right, the maximum is 3, so we need to split it into thirds. So that's how the magic works. Okay, very, very cool. We'll stop that. That's how it works. I'm glad I got to show that to you so you can see it in action. All right, so let's get the print. The last thing we want to do is we want to get the print and the email functions going. So let's create some buttons for that, and then I'm going to let you go. All right, so we can use, I've got a button here. Now what I want to do is I want to create a button regardless of the screen, whether it's day view, week view, or month view. So I'm going to copy this. I'll paste that right here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down. We want to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of this. So we can shrink this up, move this over a little bit so we have enough space for that. And then these are our filters that when they're active filters, so we don't need that much space for the filters. So we can bring it a bit down here so we have enough space. Okay, so what we want is I want to have basically a print button and an email button so that we can, regardless of the schedule, we can then print. So let's go ahead and write print schedule, and then this is going to be called print schedule. And then also I want email schedule, but we'll set the width of this probably something right around, let's say 1.4. We'll drop this down. We'll be working with it a little bit. and then we'll set it to 1.4 a little. Okay, and then I'm going to right justify it, and I want to do the same thing for this, but we want a little bit more space on the right side. So how are we going to do that? We're just going to format the shapes and set the text box here. We're going to set it to the right, maybe something like 0.03. Okay, that's going to give a little bit of space there, and then we can close out, or maybe a little bit, 0.05. Okay, so we're good on that. So printing the schedule, and now what I want to do is I want to duplicate that, Control D, and then we're going to call this email schedule. So email schedule. Put it there right next to the side, and we'll just create some icons for both of these here. So I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to add some icons. So insert, I've got some icons saved here to make it quicker, and then insert, and we'll do something like 0.2. Those are too big. Okay, so the print schedule here is going to go here. We've got a little bit bigger icons that we need here, and we can increase those button sizes here. Let's bring the height of those buttons a little bit to 0.2, a little bit small. All right, I like that. That looks good. Though we're going to line everything up horizontally, so we'll bring it down here. Let's bring this down a little bit so you can see it horizontally. They're horizontally lined up. Now I can probably shrink those buttons down a little bit here to what, say 1.3 here. All right. All right, we don't need that. Okay, we got a macros assigned to them. We don't need that, so that's why it changed. Okay, so let's go 1.3. And then I'll just, also for this one too, 1.3 on this, make them the same. And then all we need to do is just group them and line them up. I want to group them individually, and then I want to group them together. So notice that everything's grouped here, and then we'll group this one, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Grouping that, let's line them up here horizontally, and then group that. Okay, so that's good. Email and print. This icon's a little bit big, isn't it? Okay, so 0.19. All right, so I like that there. So we got email, and what I'm going to do is then group these two together because they're going to act independently. So lining them up, grouping them, because it is this group, I want them to appear regardless of the schedule. So in this one, I'm going to format the picture here. I'm going to actually go down to the properties, and this one I don't want to move or side with cells. I want to show them regardless of that. So we don't need to print those here. So we can click close on that. So now we're going to assign individual macros. I'm going to create one for print and email the schedule. So print schedule and email schedule. We can zoom back out here to 100%. So let's write some macros in here because it's going to be used for regardless of day view, week view, or month view. We're going to put those in the miscellaneous, which is going to be here, the schedule miscellaneous. So the first one we're going to do is we'll put it all the way at the top so we can see it easy. But we do need to dimension some variables that are going to be used for them regardless. So let's do that right now. Dimension let's say the schedule range as a range. And also I want to dimension the last row as long and the last column because it's going to be dynamic for some, last column as long. Also, I want to know the schedule type. Dimension the schedule type as string. Okay, so the first macro we're going to write is the sub schedule and then print schedule. That's the easier one, print, and then we're going to do email print schedule. I'm going to show you how to do HTML emails. So we're going to embed that in. So print schedule. So of course we're focused on the with scheduling screen. Schedule screen here. And the schedule type is going to be equal to whatever's in B3. So we're going to set that. That's important. Day, week, or month view. Dot range. B3 is going to set it up. B3 is day, week, or month. Schedule type. It's going to be day, week, or month. So now that we've got the schedule type, we're going to use select case. So select case is going to be equal to, again, in this case, schedule type. Schedule type. So what if it's day? Case is equal to day. So in this case, we have case is equal to week or case is equal to month. Case is equal to, and then in this case, week, or case is equal to, there's no space between there, or month. Okay, so we can just copy this and then put down the month. So we've got those three different cases, and we'll be writing it code accordingly to each one. So what if it is day? In the day case, what do I need to do? Let's take a look at the day and see. We got to set that range. So here's the day view. And so we're going to be based it on this. So also, let's say we want to make sure to hide this. I want to hide this. So let's update that now because we're in the same module. So hiding all views, right? So the first thing what I want to do is I want to go CR. I want to make sure we hide S all the way through S. And the month view, we can probably show it. It's up to you. So you can change that to CS, okay? So that's just going to update that. It's easy to do while we're there. So now when I click, let's take a look at back in the day view, we want to make sure that that's hidden here. Oh, we got to assign the macro to this. We didn't do that. So let's update that. I'm going to assign that macro, schedule day view refresh. So schedule day view. That's the one we want to figure. You can also do the current day or day view refresh. So we can do that since we're already on the day view right here. Click OK. So now it's assigned there. Now it'll refresh the schedule automatically. Okay, so let's go back into week, and we still need to assign month, and let's see, day. Okay, so now it's going to be set. Now it'll be hidden because we went through the columns. All right, so we need to determine what is the last column. I need to know the last column because it's variable, right? Well, let's unhide this. We don't know when the last column is. I need to find the last column wherever there's an empty space, so then I'm going to subtract 1 from the time and get the last column. So I'm going to be looking for this space. It's going to help us determine what the last column is in the day view. So let's write that up right now inside this day view. So we're going to determine that last column. So the last column is equal to dot cells. We know it's row 2, so let's write in row 2. But what is the last column? We're going to start it out. It's going to be based on end XLF. So we need to determine that. 15 is the possible. Dot end, so that's the starting point. Why are we using 15? Because that's the starting point. Equals, what is this column? Equals column, right? This is column 16, so I'm going to start out at 15, and I'm going to find the first blank cell. That's going to help us. The first blank cell is going to be this, dot XL to the right, dot column, and then we want a -1 because I don't want to include the time. So that is going to get us our first blank cell. And the last row, what is the last row? I need to know the last row, but it's going to be, I don't want it all of them. I need to determine how many rows there are. Well, I can count the blanks. So if I take a look at this, and I know, let's say the maximum number of rows are, let's say all the way to, let's say 100. 100. What if I count the blanks? If I count the blanks, and I determine that the number of blanks are, let's say, 63, or the blank cells, then all I need to do is simply add 2. That's going to get us 3, right? So I need to add 2 because our first one starts on 3. So let's count the blanks. That's going to determine that. So the last row is equal to 100 minus all the blanks. So how do we find the blanks? Well, we can use count blank. We can use worksheet function. So worksheet function dot count blank. Dot, what is the blanks based on? It's going to be based on, we can use 03. So dot range, starting from 03 all the way through 01, 02, counting those blanks, not dot value, and then we need to add 2 and plus 2, right? So that's going to, because 3 is the first one. So that's going to get us our last row, 100 minus all the blanks based on this range. What are all the blanks in that range? So we're going to subtract 100 from that and then add 2. That's going to get us our last row. Now we have the last row and last column. Now we know we can set the range. So set the schedule range is going to be equal to the range, and it's going to be the schedule dot cells, and then it's going to, what's our first one? Our first one is going to be based on row 1, column 15. That's the first cell inside the range. And then what is the last one? The last one is going to be, again, schedule dot cells, last row, last column. That is going to be our scenario. And then all we need to do is set up the page. This one we can do portrait, right? Dot page setup. In this case, we'll do portrait. Dot orientation is going to be equal to, we'll do portrait on this game. We'll do landscape on the other two. Okay, great. So that's it for the day. But what if it's week? If it's week, let's take a look at that. Inside our schedule, again here, let's set a macro to this week view. Show week view, that's the one I want. Click OK, and then it's going to show the week view. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So we got the last column. All I need to know is really what the last column and the first column is, right? We know BN1 could be the first column, or in this case, equals column, right? The starting column in this case is going to be 65, one less than that. And the last one, I believe it's going to be 92 on that. We'll take a quick look at that, or 100, all the way over that. So it's the last possible day, equals column, the last possible day. It's 78 on that. Okay, so we've got that 78 is the last column. And what about the last row? The last possible row in this case would be possibly 100. So keep that in mind. Again, we're going to use the same thing that we did last time, the same formula that we did for the last row. So we can just copy and paste that here. And so the last row is going to be exactly the same in this case. And then all we need to do is just update the last row, column in this case, the last column is going to be equal to 78. So that's it. That's it. Then all we need to do is set the schedule and copy that, and then we'll update that accordingly. Okay, the page setup, in this case, we're going to use landscape. So equals landscape, because I want that for the week view, and also the schedule range. We need to update this. It's not going to be, it's going to be 1, but it's going to be 65 is the starting one. 65 is going to be the starting one, and also the last row and the last column. Why is it 65? Again, this is 66, so we're just going to, let's bring it over here, all the way over here to the beginning over here. There we go. Equals, again, 66, so 65 is the first column that we want to bring over, 65. Okay, so we've got that. Now all we need to do is month view. So again, we can copy this and then we'll just set that up. So month view, we're going to do a few things here. What is the last column, the first column? So it's much easier in the month view because we have a very, very fixed there. So we click on the month view. Let's take equals column. What is that first column? Is 86. This is the one that's 92. What is the last column? Equals column 92. Okay, so we know it's going to be between 86 and 92, and we also need to get the last row. What is the last row? It's going to be 38. So 38. So we can just build that into there. So the last column in this case is 92. The last row is going to be 38. So we can get rid of all of this. Here we know it's just 38. It's simple. It's a fixed last row based on the month view. And then we can set the schedule range. It's going to be starting out at 1, and then this time it's going to be 86 is the first column. The last row and the last column, the page setup is going to be landscape. Okay, good. So now that we've set it up based on the day, week, or month view, all we need to do is just set the page setup. So .page setup .print area, we'll set the print area is going to be equal to the schedule range, which is already defined as a range, address. So the address of that is going to be that. There. So that's going to set the print area range based on a range. Okay, so now all we do is print out. Now I just need to print out, printing it out, and we're going to base it on, of course, from and to copies. We don't need the preview. The active printer will do that as true. Print to file, and then print to file name, and then ignore print areas will make that false. And mine's, of course, Snagit editor. Okay, so I think that's it. There, all we need to do is just run that macro, check for any issues there. And let's pick this XLS. Okay, that's got to be XL to the right. Not just XL, not XLS. And let's take a quick look here. Okay, that looks good. I like it's printing to my printer there. And all we need to do is just print preview, and we'll set the margins accordingly. We just need to update the margins. So that looks pretty good. All we're going to be doing, let's update the margins accordingly, and then we're good to go. Okay, so we'll go print preview, and then let's take a look at these print. First thing I want to do is I want to scale. I want to fit to one sheet. Then I'm going to set the margins here, and then we'll just shrink these down so that everything prints in one page. Okay, then we'll bring it update, and I like that. It's looking better now. There we go. See how we're getting a nice big, of course you can remove the headers and things like that. But that gives us good. Okay, so that's good. That's the way I like. Now let's check day view, and then what we'll do is we'll assign the macro, and the macro, of course, is going to be tied to that button, the one that we just created. Then we're going to do email. So I'm going to hold down the control. That's the macro that we just created. I'm going to assign that. So it's going to be based on the schedule, print, assign the macro, schedule, in this case, print, right? Print schedule here. Now we got one more to email. So let's do that. Let's add that in. And all we're going to be doing is basically copying and pasting that and adding it in. So here we can do sub schedule and then email schedule. We do need the print range. I need to do the same one, so we can copy this here and paste it in here, because we're going to need all of that here. In fact, we'll do all of it with schedule and input. Then we'll just build upon that, because I need to set that range. So that's very, very important. But we need some other dimensions on that, because we're going to be doing it with Outlook. So we need to do this. So we're going to dimension the Outlook app as an object, and I also want the Outlook email as an object, because we're creating an email based on that. Outlook mail as an object. Also, I want to know we're going to create a picture of that, so we're going to dimension the picture width as double, and I also want the picture height. We're going to create a picture based on that. Picture height as double, and also the picture file name. Dimension the picture file name as string, right? I want to create a file because we're going to save that picture, and then we'll be able to, once we save it, we can then add it inside the HTML. We can attach it to that email. Okay, so everything else is the same. We've done that, but we've got the schedule type. That's very important. We're going to do all the cases, but now we can continue on with this. Obviously, we're not going to be printing it out, so we don't need that part. So let's define the file name. So a picture, we'll do just a temporary file name. File name is going to be equal to, I want it to be based on the path of the current workbook. This workbook dot path, and just a temporary name so we can create a picture on that, slash schedule, we'll call it schedule pic. That's the one we're going to create it, .jpg. So we're going to create that into file name because we're going to create a temporary file based on that, .jpg. Okay, so that creates the file name that we're going to creating. File, let's make sure we spell that right. I was going to debug again. File name. Okay, so continuing on, and now what I want to do is, if it exists already, I want to kill it. If this file name exists already, I want to remove it because we're going to be creating a brand new one. So if the directory of this file name is greater than 0, then we're going to kill the file name. Kill it means delete it. Kill that file name. Okay, so that will delete it. And then if it doesn't exist, it could create an error. So let's just wrap that in on error, resume next, on error, go to 0. On error, resume next, and then on error, go to 0. Okay, so now we've removed it if it exists in the file. So now what we can do is we can create it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a picture based on that range. So schedule range, we've already set the schedule range here, right? We've already set that up. Dot, what I want to do in this case is create a picture. The copy picture, I want to create a picture based on that range. XL is going to be based on the screen, not the printer. And I want to create a bitmap image, so the bitmap. And once I've done that, that's going to create the picture. Create picture based on a range. Create picture based on a range. So once we've created that, we can then add a new temporary chart. So that's going to help us. So let's do that. Let's create it with the active sheets, with active sheet dot chart objects dot add. I'm going to add something. What are we adding onto that? Well, we're going to add a picture onto that. Okay, let's set some of the parameters of that. So we're going to be adding based on that. I want the left position of that. What's going to be? It's going to be based on the schedule range dot left position of that schedule range. I also want to set the top position. So what's the top position is going to be equal to, let's say the left position, we need the equals here, that's important. Equals the top position is also going to be equal based on the top position of that. So the schedule, in this case, the schedule range dot top, and also I want the width of that. The width is going to be equal to, again, the schedule range dot width of that, and also of course the height. So this, in this case, the height is going to be equal to the schedule range dot height. So we're basically creating a chart exactly the same dimensions of that specific picture that we created based on the range. So that's it. So what do I want to do with that? So I want to set the name. Name of that, basically that is going to be equal to the schedule picture. I want to set a specific name for that new chart. Schedule pic. Okay, I also want to activate that. So we're going to set it to activate because I want to make sure it's safe. And I want to set the width of that. The picture width in a variable is equal to the schedule range dot width. And I also want to set the height. So the picture height, which is our double variable, equals the schedule range dot height. Okay, good. So now we've got that end width. So that's it. So that's it for our chart. So we basically just created a chart. And the reason we create a chart is because we can then save the picture from that chart, save it into a file name. So the only way you can save a picture in Excel is if you create a chart and then save that picture. So we've set the picture height, we've given it a name, we've done it. So now what we want to do is take that and we've activated it. So now we're going to paste that picture into the chart. So we'll do this by active chart dot paste. So it's going to paste it directly into that. So paste picture into chart, because then you can save that chart as a picture. So now what we can do is we can actually save it. So all we need to do is do this active here. Let's type it down here. Active sheet dot chart objects. Okay, the chart objects is what we're going to, that's the one we just created, which is the schedule picture. So we've got that already defined. Dot chart I want to export it. Where do I want to export it? I want to export it in basically the file path that we've created, which is of course the file name. File name, we've already created that actually it's called pick file name, pick file name. Okay, we don't need this in here. And now we're ready to delete the picture. So we've already created it. So why don't we we've already created it, we can delete the picture that we've created in there. So shapes, in this case, we've got the schedule, pick, we can then delete it. We don't need it on the sheet already because we've already created it inside the file, .delete. Once we've deleted that, we're ready to create our Outlook application. So set the Outlook app is going to be equal to create object. What object are we creating? Outlook application. Outlook dot application. Okay, so that's going to create the Outlook application. What about the email? So we're going to set the Outlook email, and Outlook mail in this case, is going to be equal to the Outlook app is going to be equal create item and then 0. Okay, so that's going to create that email. So now we can work with the email. So with the Outlook mail, we're going to do some things with it. We're going to set the attachments. I want to attach it. We've already saved a file on your computer that we're going to attach. It's going to be a hidden attachment. So attachment, believe it or not, attachments dot add pick. In this case, right, the file name, we've got a picture file name, we have that. In this case, I want it hidden, so 1 and then 0, that's going to hide it, right? But the only reason we want to attach it and hidden it is because I want to actually attach it within the HTML body, and that's what we're going to do in a minute. So let's add a subject. So the subject is going to be equal to the lesson schedule for the, and perhaps we'll add the schedule types and the schedule type, and then we'll add a space on there, and then another and then what we'll do is I want to put in the schedule, the date, but I want to format that. So I'm going to do format, and what format I'm going to do, where's the date? Of course, it's located in B4, schedule, dot range, B4, that's where our date is, dot value, and I'm going to give it a format, maybe something like dd/dd/dd/YYYY. Okay, so we're going to format that date. So that's going to be based on the schedule. So that's going to set our subject. But what about our body? It's going to be our HTML body. So .html body is going to be equal to, again, .html body. And, okay, so we're going to add to that. And what do I want a page break on that? So we're going to do a BR, which is going to be in HTML. It's going to be a new line or break, otherwise known as break. And then here's going to do please, I'll be using that often, so I'm going to copy that. Please, let's say, see the following schedule. It's going to be the first line before our picture shows up. So schedule, and then maybe we'll add 2 breaks below that. Okay, so then what do I want? Then let's say I want to actually put inside this specific picture that we just created. So how do we add it? Well, since we've added it as an attachment, we can then add it in. So we can add it using an image source. So and let's put in the image source less than img src is going to be equal to, where's it located? .html body source is going to be equal to the CID. That's going to be that hidden picture that we put in as an attachment. CID. What is it? It's called schedule. It's looking for a file name that's been attached called schedule pick. Schedule pick.jpg. Okay, so once it's found, and then we'll put the apostrophe and then quotation marks there. And then we need to set the width. So, and again, let's do this. The width is going to be equal to, and then we'll put in the apostrophe so it denotes that. And what is that schedule? It's going to be located on the double value variable we created, picture width. And what else? Now I also want to set the height. So this height is apostrophe here. Let's put in the height. Height is going to be equal to here, apostrophe, and then we'll end it. Then I want to know the picture height and the picture height. Okay, so what else? I also want to know the specific picture width, and we got the height and a new line, and let's add some text below it. So then we can do this. We can add in a brand new line here, quotation marks, and then we'll do end at. So we're ending, remember, we're ending. This is all part of the image source, right? From here to here, it's all part of the image source. So now what we want to do is add in a new line, break here, and then I'm going to add in some additional text. So how do we do that? So that's and here we can say, again, a new line. We'll add a new line. Thanks so much, Fred. Okay, and that's it. That's going to be it. So we'll end that up. That's the end of the font there. And then we'll close that out. And then the last thing we want to do is just end the span. So end that span. That's going to close everything out. Okay, so spanning that and then end the quotes. Okay, and quotation marks. So that's going to end everything. Then the last thing what I want to do is I want to display that. I don't want to send the email. So dot display will display that email. So that's it for the email. So let's take a quick look here and see how we're looking. And then we'll let you go. All right, take a look at that. So I'm going to run that macro. Let's run it macro. Okay, that looks really good. That's the month view schedule. I like that. We're going to assign that macro to that button there. So let's do that. That's the macro we just created here. I'm going to assign the macro. And then what we'll do is we'll scroll down here. We actually already had it signed, but schedule here, what we're looking for is email right here, email schedule. Click on here. Okay, so now it's been assigned. So let's take a look at the week view, try that out, and then print that out. So we want to make sure that those buttons are going to appear no matter what. Click on the email schedule. It's going to create that, and it's going to assign that email inside. So we've got the text before, the text after. Very, very good. All right. I'm really, really glad I got to show this to you. Thank you so much. If you do appreciate these, all I do is ask you to like, share. Of course, you can always, if you want to support us, we've got the 175 workbook pack, $66, a great, great value. Tons of people are buying it. That'll really help us out. I appreciate that. I cannot wait for part 17. We've got something brand new in store for you. We'll see you then. Thanks so much.